You've probably seen this plant floating through the air like tiny parachutes. A plant that feeds monarch butterflies, survives tough prairie conditions, and yes, can even become yarn. Today, we are talking about milkweed, specifically how people have used milkweed fiber and how you can spin and knit it yourself.
Today we're getting into one of the most satisfying, slightly chaotic, and very misunderstood garden tasks, dividing perennials. Because sometimes you're helping your plants thrive, and sometimes you're just out there committing horticultural crimes.
Hello and welcome to the Petal Plot Pod, a seasonal plant stories and garden tips podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Aneesa.
And I'm Eric.
Milkweed, especially species like common milkweed, produces seed pods filled with silky fibers called floss. If you've ever opened one, you know the magic. Inside is a cloud of soft, white, almost weightless fibers attached to seeds, perfect for catching the wind. But here's the twist. The fluff isn't just for flying. Milkweed fiber is hollow, which makes it incredibly insulating, water-resistant, and silky and smooth to the touch. During World War II, milkweed floss was actually collected across the United States, especially in the Midwest, to stuff life jackets when kapok fiber imports were cut off. Kapok fiber, if you're not familiar with it, is a sustainable plant-based fiber harvested from the seed pods of the ceiba tree, mostly in Asia and Indonesia, often called silk cotton. But after these imports were cut off, children were recruited to gather milkweed pods. One large bag could potentially save a life. So what is the reality of actually knitting with milkweed? Milkweed fiber is soft, but it's also pretty short and slippery, and it lacks that natural crimp that helps wool stick together. That means you usually can't spin milkweed floss by itself because it won't turn into a strong yarn. Instead, traditional and modern fiber artists blend it with other fibers like wool, alpaca, or cotton. Think of milkweed as the luxury ingredient, the cashmere of the prairie, but one that needs a structural partner. You hear that, Eric? The cashmere of the prairie.
I am going to start calling it that now. I feel like when people
Yup.
ask about it, at work or in the garden center, I think that's a great selling point for the milkweed. I mean, they already got butterflies.
Absolutely.
Why not add the cashmere?
Yeah, I will from
Yes.
now on be referring to milkweed as the cashmere of the prairie.
Well, it's so cool hearing this backstory about utilizing it in that way. It's kind of like we should just grow more of it.
Yeah. Can you think of other plants that
That
fall into the luxury goods category?
luxury goods?
Yeah, or
Like
made
it
into
creates luxury
well,
goods?
I guess like a really
Mm,
old bonsai would be like a luxury good, but that's more like, okay, but something, oh wait, lotus flowers. Lotus flowers get made into silk, right?
they do.
And
Yeah.
hemp, there's got to be
hmm
some like expensive boho chic hemp textiles out there, right?
I like how you up that with super expensive boho. But yeah, it probably is somewhere.
The best time of year to harvest is, of course, in the late fall, after the pods have dried out, but before they burst open completely. So you want to collect mature pods that are brown, not green, as they start out green. So once they've turned brown, they are dry to the touch and they're just barely starting to split open. But definitely leave some seeds behind that can naturally seed themselves in the area. Then open them carefully and remove the seeds from the floss and put them aside to plant for next year. Now, here's the tedious part. Separating seeds from fiber can take quite a bit of time, and the fibers cling tightly to each of the seeds. So some people will pull them apart one by hand. Some people will use a gentle combing technique or experiment with small-scale ginning methods. So this is making me think of making mustard from the
Mm.
garden. Have you ever done that, Eric?
No, tell me about it.
So I've let
No.
mustard greens go to seed before, and they'll make like a billion seed pods. And then I've collected the seed
Yeah.
pods, let them dry out, and then cracked each one open to collect tiny, tiny mustard seeds. And it took me
Mm.
hours to collect enough seeds to make the smallest possible jar of mustard. But it was really meditative. It was like relaxing. Like you kind of had to just like get into the zone of this cathartic, repetitive motion and just do
Yeah.
it for a very long time. But yeah, it was really meditative. So like 10 out of 10 would do it again for sure. Though buying mustard is like one of the cheapest things you can possibly buy. So then you can make a jar of
That's what I was
mustard in
gonna
like 2
I was
minutes.
just gonna say, I'm just gonna buy it. But I'm so impatient, and so I'm sure, like, I agree, like, some of it can be very meditative, and there's things I find in the garden that I enjoy just doing.
So, once you've got a bunch of clean milkweed floss, you'll want to blend it. A common beginner blend would be about 70 to 90% wool and 10 to 30% milkweed fiber. Why? Well, the wool provides strength and elasticity, and the milkweed adds a softness, a warmth, and a subtle sheen. So, to prepare this, you're going to want to layer the wool and milkweed together and then card them using hand carders or a drum carder and create a uniform bat or roving. When spinning, use a really light touch and add a little bit more twist than usual to hold those fibers together. Expect a slightly fuzzy yarn. Now for the knitting. Milkweed blend yarn behaves a lot like rustic wool, but softer. So, the best projects to make with milkweed blend yarn are things like scarves and hats or lightweight mittens because it's really warm, but it's also pretty breathable. However, it's not super great for things that are going to be heavy wear items like socks. So, when you're knitting, you'll want to use slightly tighter stitches to compensate for the fiber slipperiness, and the finished fabric, soft, light, and surprisingly warm.
Sounds like an amazing thing to wear, but I was also thinking in my head, I don't know if I've ever looked at a tag and seen milkweed as, like, what's been used to create that fabric,
I'm
or
not even sure what it looks like. I'm going to Google it, see if I can find
let's Google it.
scarf milkweed blend. Because I just learned about this by researching. I don't think I've even seen it in real life.
Yeah, that's what I was curious. Or I was curious if, like, the amount or percent or something is just taken out, or it's not being held up as the cashmere of the prairie as it should be.
Oh, yeah. Yep, you can find some milkweed fiber yarn on Etsy. You can get some scarves made out of it. There's wow, it's really pretty. It definitely has a cashmere look to it. Like, you know how cashmere has that soft,
Hmm.
fuzzy look? It looks very similar to cashmere. So that's fun.
Hmm. That's really cool. I'm wondering how much of the industry uses it versus, makers and creatives utilizing it in their products.
Yeah, I would imagine it's more on the makers and creatives side of production,
Yeah.
but it looks like there are a couple companies that work with it. So that's kind of fun. Milkweed is, of course, the host plant for monarch butterflies. Female monarchs lay eggs on milkweed, which provides necessary toxins that protect caterpillars from predators and nourish them until they become butterflies. As of late 2024, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service found that monarch butterflies meet the criteria for protection under the Endangered Species Act and proposed listing them as a threatened species. Western populations have declined by over 95% since the 1980s. The International Union for Conservation of Nature classified the migratory monarch as endangered in 2022, and the main threats include a loss of habitat, specifically milkweed for larvae, pesticide exposure, and climate change. So, growing and harvesting milkweed responsibly connects your craft to conservation. In places like Minnesota, restoring milkweed habitats is a major effort to support declining monarch populations. So, if you're harvesting, take only a portion of the pods and leave plenty for natural reseeding. That way, your yarn starts out as part of a living ecosystem, not just a raw material. And consider planting your own patch. You can grow it in your yard, or you can grow them in a container on a balcony, or on a rooftop, or on a parking lot. Save the seeds and give away the ones you can't plant yourself. Nothing says love like gifting native flower seeds to help save the monarchs. Milkweed also isn't just one plant, there's a whole cast of characters, each one growing in its own corner of North America, and each one offering a fiber of some kind. So, here are the ones most often gathered, spun, and eventually knit into something you can hold. Can you name them, Eric? The milkweeds of America?
No, I know I can't. I know there's a list, so I pretty comfortable with, like, swamp
Mhm.
milkweed.
Yeah, for sure.
um
Yep.
that's what I have in my garden, but
Yeah,
Yes.
swamp milkweed is so pretty. The fibers of swamp milkweed are a little bit finer and sometimes silkier, but the pods are smaller, so it does take a little bit more patience to gather
Mhm.
it. Of course, there's the classic milkweed found in prairies, easy to grow, even in your boulevard. Big pods, abundant floss. This is the one that most people start with, is the common, easy to find milkweed. And then there's, of course, butterfly weed. Bright orange,
Mhm.
sun loving, loved by pollinators. Those pods are also going to
Mhm.
be fewer and tighter, but the fiber is still there. And then there's showy milkweed, which is a little bit more common out west, but it does grow here. And they have softer looking pods and a generous amount of floss. And many spinners say that showy milkweed is one of the loveliest milkweeds to work with. And we have world milkweed, which is really delicate and fine, like it's almost airy. And then those I had heard of because I think we have all of those at the garden center. But then there's
Mhm.
green milkweed, which I guess is just another prairie
Oh,
native. I hadn't really heard of green
okay.
milkweed, had you? That was new to me.
No, I'd have to look that one up.
And then antelope horns, which is a desert milkweed. The pods, I guess, are curved like
What?
horns. So, hence
Ooh.
the
Okay,
name.
I just wanna grow that for
Right,
that.
yeah.
You know me. If a plant has something unique, like, I'll grow
Yeah,
it.
you should. Um And then there's also an aquatic milkweed. So this one is not going to probably grow around here. It definitely grows down south where it's warmer, but it's found
Mhm.
near water. And
Mhm.
just kind of a reminder that milkweed can be dry and wet areas.
Yeah.
So,
I was
mhm,
thinking of where I like to, because sometimes I feel like it's hard to plant milkweed just on its own. I think it always needs like a family of flowers or things to grow. But I love planting it in grass,
mm,
like tall
mhm,
miscanthus grass or something. And I think I do that because I think at one point I don't like the look of it after it's kind of done its flowering or whatever. But it's usually at the same height level.
mhm.
And I find that that helps a little bit with like stabilization of like holding it up if there's winds or anything like that. But I think it looks pretty amongst things.
That's such a good idea, and it mimics, like, the prairie environment that it would normally grow in, but
True.
you're right, it does look a little off it does look a little unsightly after it, like, starts to decline for the year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different plants I think that do that at some point, they start to look a little past their peak,
Mhm,
and I think it's always, like, smart to, like, pair it with something that'll keep, like, kinda covering it up. It's kinda like when tulips come up and or alliums come up and you're trying to cover the leaves afterwards
mhm.
because you have to leave them. And so if you can have something else just kinda, like, cover over it, it kinda makes it look, uh,
Yeah, for sure.
additionally pretty with it, yeah.
Yeah, a
Mhm.
lot of the I looked all these up so I could look at their flowers too, and they're all so pretty. So if you haven't heard of some of these,
Mm.
like we haven't heard of some of these, definitely look them up. They're really pretty and could provide some fun garden inspo. Milkweed is not the easiest fiber to work with, but it connects you to your landscape and ecosystem and to a slower kind of making. From life saving flotation devices to hand spun yarn to a scarf wrapped around your neck on a cold morning. Next time you see those silky seeds floating through the air, you might just be looking at your next knitting project.
Let's be honest. Your first time dividing a perennial feels wrong. You dig up this perfectly happy plant, you start pulling it apart, and your brain is really screaming, this is how plants die. But then you kind of fast forward one season and suddenly it's fuller, it blooms better, and now you have three plants instead of one. So that's when it kind of clicks. This isn't destruction, it's about multiplication. And also a gateway into owning like way too many plants, right? So, quick educational moment on dividing. So, it is used to help rejuvenate growth. It prevents die out many times in the center of perennial plants. And it also helps improve airflow. So, which hello means fewer diseases. Anissa, do you remember the first plant you ever divided?
Oh.
And like, what was your confidence level and what were you prepared for?
Oh, it was for sure a hosta, for sure. And I think it was absolute reckless abandon. I just felt I mean, I had gotten hostas from other gardeners' yards and watched the way that they just
Yeah.
just went at it with a shovel, threw it in a bag, can
Right.
sort of drop kick it into a hole, and it's fine, you know?
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's such a good one to start with because it feels like it's like foolproof, right?
Mhm.
For me, I feel like it was iris, which I just remember my mom digging up and then like pulling each individual iris
Mm,
apart. And when we were done, I was like, we have like, a field of iris apparently now.
yeah.
I feel like I've also done ones. I mean, grass always seems like an easy one usually to do. I feel like it's very similar to hosta. You kind of murder it and kind of chop it all up and then throw it in the ground.
Mhm.
Um, and then I remember other times I think I've done a peony before, and was thinking the same thing, but like I was not gentle enough, so I lost part
Oh
of
my
that peony
gosh,
for
yeah,
sure, which
same.
was sad.
I tried to divide one of my peonies a couple of years ago because the spot was just getting too shady, so it kept getting smaller every year. So I was like, "Oh, I should take some of it and
Yeah,
move it to a sunnier spot." And they're really
yeah,
sensitive. Like, I'm not sure if it's well,
hmm
it was like hanging on by a thread last year. So we'll see what happens this year, but I
yeah,
felt kind of bad. I was like, "Oh shoot. I
yeah.
kind of destroyed what was there."
Well, I know their peonies are plants that last a long time
Mhm.
too, right? Like they can outlive us really.
Mhm.
But and you also have to be careful when you replant them. Like you plant them at the right depth, because they're picky about being planted too deep or too shallow, which can affect the blooms, right? So like they're a little finicky, but I mean technically they are you can divide them. Like they are a plant you can divide. It's not like not recommended,
Mhm.
but I think there's a little more finesse needed when doing the peony.
Yeah, I have my peonies well, not all of them. A couple of my peonies are from my great grandma's house that my mom dug up, moved to her house here
Yeah.
in Minnesota, dug up, moved to a house in Connecticut, dug up, and then when I got my house, brought them here. So these peonies have like traveled around, and whatever she did, when I put those in the ground, they popped up great. But
Yep.
I I was not so lucky. I guess I should have thought about it more. I think I just had more confidence than I deserved to have when I tried to replant it.
So when we talk about dividing, I think it's important to talk about like when to divide. And peonies is a great example of when you'd probably do that late in the season. So here in Minnesota, I think timing is really everything. And honestly, I strongly lean towards like early spring dividing for most perennials. And I think one, because it's cooler temps, there's usually more consistent moisture for us here, and you have the entire growing season for them to kind of establish versus doing it in the midsummer where you hit the heat part or late in fall. So like the best early spring candidates, like just like we talked about, hostas are great early in the season, just when they're starting to come up. Daylilies, ornamental grasses, bee balm, phlox, hardy geranium. And so those are really easy. It's kind of right when they start to emerge and you see a little bit of green happening is a great time to go ahead and divide. But now late fall dividing can work, but I'm a little more selective in that. So some of the best fall division plant, and I'll say even like late summer, like Siberian iris, peonies would be another one. The dailies again, because you can actually do it again late in the season, coral bells and like certain sedums. But things to avoid for fall dividing would be like any plant that's like marginally hardy or anything that's like slow to establish or really late bloomers that need energy stored through the winter to rebloom. Consider those as kind of rules, to wait until spring. Have you done dividing either more so in the spring or in the fall?
I think I try to shoot for the spring because you are giving them that longer summer growth period to establish and get strong before winter. But of course, with hostas, I feel like that could be done fall or spring. However, I would say that I am like multiple years behind on dividing my hostas at this point because every spring I'm like, oh no, I'll do it in the fall. And then the fall comes and I'm like, oh, I'll do it in the spring. And now they're
Mm.
like, some of them
Hmm.
have turned into rings. And I'm just like, okay, I
Yeah.
have to do it this spring. They're not looking good.
That's a perfect example of when you know you need to divide is when you do see like either a dead center
Mhm.
in the middle of your perennial or it kind of starts to ring out because perennials actually are growing from the middle out. And so when you start to see less in the middle, that's the time to really think about dividing, right? Or if you maybe even notice just less flowering, maybe there's no dead center, but your plant just feels like it's less flowering than it normally does, could be an indicator too that maybe dividing it would help. So, like some plants you can literally pull apart with your hands, and others like need a shovel or just like a bit of attitude to pull them apart. Pull apart plants like daylilies, even hostas sometimes can be, although I just take a shovel to those.
Mhm.
Coral bells, some of the creeping ground covers like a juga or creeping phlox easily kind of pull apart. Iris, to me, the bearded iris are super easy to pull apart by hand.
Wild
And
ginger.
wild ginger, yes. And they have kind of like looser root systems, so you can kind of just tease them apart and it's pretty easy. And you kind of know it when you start to look at it. Like cut apart plants where you have to kind of commit a little more, like your ornamental grasses. I think those can be really brutal and you just kind of need to take a saw to them. Other Siberian iris versus bearded iris, sedums, black-eyed Susans, usually. And in that case, you're using, like a spade or knife and kind of putting your full body weight into it sometimes to like break them apart. But I think the reality is you need to feel comfortable just slicing through and not being like, oh, I cut one of the roots or, oh, I got one of the plants. You can't look at it that way. You're making, sections of the plant that have a root system and the foliage attached. And that might be very small, like just a handful, or you could just divide things, into two sections. The other thing to mention is if some of those plants have some of that dead center, some of those old, like I always think of irises, have that dead iris kind of in the middle that's just not growing anything, but it's still attached to everything. That's kind of like the mother iris that's kind of spent. You can just toss that, right? So when you see those dead, unused parts that aren't producing any foliage, like go ahead and just get rid of those. And then some plants kind of need to be divided regularly. So whether that's like your grasses many times, again, the bearded iris comes to mind. I feel like salvia at some points feels like it needs to, and sometimes your hardy geranium. I actually love dividing hardy geranium because that you literally just need like a little rhizome with some roots on it, and you can just pop that in anywhere.
And they'll just take off.
I
They're so
feel,
hardy that way.
yeah,
Mhm.
right? Lamb's ear, I feel like is super easy that way. I feel like I've just put like sticks in the ground and then all of a sudden it's like a big clump come the next year. Have you had one of those tough plants that was just really hard to divide and it almost feels like you just went through a gym membership maybe afterwards to do so?
Um, irises surprise me by how bulky they are. Like, if you let irises go for a while, they form this, like,
Mm,
fully dense mat. Like, it's just like,
true.
I mean, yeah, and you can rip them apart with your hands, but I'm always like, "Wow, this is, like, just a contiguous mat of iris rhizomes," right?
Yeah. Some things I found I'm better off lifting out and then using a garden hose and spraying off most of the dirt to kind of like open it up a little bit, right? So I can kind of get in there. I also think it's important if you're going to go divide to spend the time picking any weeds out of something. And I always think of that like when I've taken plants from like my mom and all of a sudden I have all this grass growing up in between it. And I'm like, oh, it's annoying to get in there and try to actually get all those pieces out. But when you divide, it's probably a good time to take a little extra time to like pull out any weeds or other things that might be part of it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Like, just take that moment, pull it out there. Don't let the hitchhikers get established.
Yeah. We should also talk a little bit about like plants you should not divide or like very rarely like dividing things like baptisia, which has like a really deep taproot is kind of hard to move and do. Sometimes your butterfly weed, lavender, because it gets that woody stem is really hard. Russian sage sometimes can fall into that. And then there's like some other things I was thinking of like just things that like columbine like, rather than divide it, I just let it reseed and kinda let the mother plant usually kind of the old plant kinda dies, right?
Mhm.
So, I think take into consideration things that have, like, those long taproots or woody crowns to kinda think twice, unless you're really gonna dig up a ton of soil with it. I think it's hard to, like, actually divide them as well and have success.
Mhm. I've also failed at dividing snake root when I should have just left it alone and then
Mm,
lost most of it, except for like one sad leftover plant that never flowered
yes.
or something. I'm like, I just weakened it.
Yeah,
I weakened it. I don't know why I thought I could break it into
right.
three and have it plant a cluster of 3, no, I'll have less than I started
Yeah,
with.
yeah. And we should probably mention, what about shrubs, right? We've been talking about all perennials, herbaceous perennials. And so I think to clear it up, because people will try this, I think, can you divide shrubs? I feel like the answer is almost no. So shrubs are not perennials in that sense. They're woody plants. And so trying to divide, hydrangeas or boxwood or nine bark or spirea, you'll just end up with like a lot of stress and poor recovery and dead plants probably.
Mhm.
And most of those actually you have better luck propagating versus dividing. And so propagating looks a little more different where you can maybe take some of those side shoots and get them to start to grow some roots. And then you remove that from the mother plant.
Yeah, that's so true, except for maybe lilacs. I feel like lilacs, you could dig out a section of the
Mm.
root and stick it in the ground, and it would.
Yeah, and I was reading up too on like a lot of the suckering shrubs can be great maybe to do a little more division, like dogwood or sumac,
Mhm.
because they kind of actually those suckers many times will produce their own root system
Mm.
as well, and so you're in a sense just taking it off of the mother plant a little bit more, and removing those offsets versus slicing half the plant in half,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to propagate a shrub or divide a shrub? Or you just talked about lilacs.
Mhm, yeah, well, yeah, and I said lilacs because when I have 3 lilac hedges that I planted because I went up to a farm where they had put an ad out, to come get free lilacs because they had mowed them over. They were trying to kill their lilacs, and they just kept growing up. So
Oh,
they wanted someone to come dig the roots up. So I only went up and dug these, like, mowed over roots, but that plant is so hardy, so each little clump of root just turned into a new shrub. But I have propagated, like, elderberries. I have a beautiful elderberry bush that I had propagated from a branch from someone else's house, and that worked really well.
yeah, I haven't divided anything other than I guess a sumac in a sense I divided. I ended up putting it in a pot because I didn't want it growing all around in my garden anymore. I think is a great design trick and money saver. Obviously, right? I feel like when we design gardens, many times people, can be very shocked by the price of how much all the plants cost, right? And it's kind of a great moment to say maybe you don't have to, fill in all your plants at once. Maybe you can actually do some division over 3 years or 5 years to start to slowly fill in your garden. That maybe day one isn't much because you just didn't have, all the money to pay for brand new plants from the garden center. But it's a great way to really continue to fill your garden. I feel like a lot of good garden design is about repetition through your garden. And so if you're dividing your plants, you're also creating a great design element by creating repetition throughout your garden because you may divide those salvias or whatever, and then you don't have a plan for where they go. And so you're like, well, they're going to go over here, and really you're creating repetition in the garden without you maybe even thinking about it. But it's a great way to do that as well.
Mhm. I've definitely been guilty of that for sure.
Yeah. Well, and the real talk moments, I mean, you will over divide at some point. You will run out of space and you will start like giving plants away like they're zucchinis in August, right? Like, and that's when we put things out on the curb and let people pick them up. I think the one thing to think about if you're doing a lot of division is to still be aware of like spacing because you don't want to create extra work for yourself one day that this plant now is going to get to mature size. And again, you're going to have to divide it over and over and over just to like keep it within check. And I don't think you should ever plant something knowing it's just going to constantly outgrow its area and you're going to have to constantly divide or break it down. The other trick I like to use is if you do it early on, that's a great time to take some of those extras and use them in your containers for the season, and then maybe get rid of them.
Mm,
So if you have
mhm.
extra, maybe it's just putting, some extra conocloa grass or that lamb's ear just as like spillers within a
Oh,
pot.
yeah.
Perennials can be in pots too. It's not just annuals.
Mhm.
And I think you could create some interesting mixes by utilizing some of your perennials in that way.
That's a good idea.
Dividing perennials might feel a little chaotic, but it's one of the best ways to build a healthier, fuller, and more intentional garden. And sometimes the best plants you'll ever have are the ones you almost destroyed. Hey, Nisa, do we have a garden question for the week?
Yes, we do. All right, let me see here. Okay. Hi, Petal and Plot. Longtime listener, first time caller. I started some seeds indoors in coconut coir, and they've sprouted successfully. However, some of the leaves that have sprouted on my peach foxglove sprouts are starting to brown on the edges. I'm wondering if this is because they're not getting nutrients from the cocoa coir, or are they getting too much light? All my other sprouts are doing well, no browning at all. Might they do better if I pot them up into proper soil? Here's a picture. Thanks for all your work. I love listening every week. Kelly in Connecticut. And I don't know if you're in our email, if you can see the
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah. I feel like, for one, hi, Kelly. uh, I think she's on probably the right solution there because I know coconut coir is a very sterile medium to use. I mean, it's great for seedlings, right? And I think also great for the environment because of its reuse. But I would say I would look at fertilization because there's a good chance it's just not getting enough. I don't think it's light because if it's the bottom leaves and not the top leaves, usually if you're getting too much light and burning, that's going to happen probably on the top of your leaves more so than the bottom. What do you think, Anissa?
Yeah, I mean, the picture obviously doesn't look like they're being underwatered, so it's not a watering issue.
Yeah, it could also be a humidity thing, potentially, just because, I mean, coconut coir tends to hold on to some good moisture. I mean, I do always say like seedlings do well to dry out a little bit between waterings, right? But I kind of would lean a little to fertilization, and I feel like you have plenty of leaves, so I would be fertilizing and giving like a half strength fertilizer if possible.
So maybe a nutrient deficiency.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking in this. Yeah. I mean, otherwise they look pretty healthy. I wouldn't be too scared that it's gonna like consume them. It looks kind of minimal, but I get the worry with little plant babies that immediately we want to react. But I think I would watch watering. I think your lighting's probably great, and I would look at fertilizer. Add a little fan too if you don't have some air movement happening in the area. That can make a big difference too.
If you have a gardening question you'd like us to answer, please write to us at petalandplot@gmail.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and click the follow button to hear our next episode.
As garden designers here at Petal and Plot, we also offer year-round in-person and virtual gardening consultations and custom garden designs as well. Want to see more of what we're up to? Please follow us on Instagram at Petal and Plot. That's PETALNPLOT.